What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm your host, Chris Raybon of the Action Network, and this is our AFC at win totals episode for 2024. We're back at it. Joining me, as always, to break it down, one of the sharpest NFL betting minds in the game, the Prime Minister of Degenerate Nation, Stucky. Stuck. What's going on? Glad to be back talking football with you. How's your offseason?
Yeah, what's going on, brother? Yeah, off season's been good. Got some rest. Got some books in, and got some trips coming up. But yeah, it's back to the grind. NFL seems like it's almost like 365 days of the year at this point. But yeah, last time we spoke, we successfully navigated the Super Bowl with my San Fran first half in your Chiefs full game,
Oh, baby.
which I'm
Perfect.
glad worked out. Although I ended the season on just such a sour note because I had double overtime 100-1,
Ooh.
which was just seconds. If they didn't snap the ball in time, they probably would have let the clock run down and go to double overtime. If the play clock wasn't going to run out. Anyway, it was a fun Super Bowl, and it's another good year for the pod. Hopefully we can repeat it today. Yeah, just looking forward to just kind of chopping it up, keep it really high level, because later in the summer we're going to go in depth. I got to put even hours upon hours into these teams even more, and there'll be injuries, there'll be more vet signings. We'll start to get more and more intel as the summer progresses, but I think it's a good time to just kind of check in, get some high level thoughts after the draft and the schedule release.
Absolutely. So we'll go team by team here, give out each team's win total. If we have any leans early on at this point in the offseason, which we do for a couple of teams, we'll talk about those as well. So let's jump right into it. Start in the AFC East. The Buffalo Bills are projected to be the top team with a win total of 10.5 at BetMGM. It is slightly juiced to the under at minus 120. I kind of lean under on this one, just because I do kind of question, if what the Bills did to kind of rebound last year, going extremely run heavy, if that's sustainable over a full season, especially, now you have no Stephon Diggs. So that receiving core is a big question to me. I think the road schedule is pretty tough. But what are your thoughts stuck on this Buffalo Bill team? And in particular, just does the offense have enough? Can they put together a high level offense, offense capable of winning 11 plus games without Stephon Diggs or a true number one wide receiver at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Diggs loss is a bit overblown just because, I mean, they weren't even using him as much as like you would think, assume for a number one receiver. He would like there was definitely like a rift there, but he would come off the field on third downs. But like you said, who's the number one? Someone needs to emerge. They lost 250 targets from their team last year. Can Keon Coleman as a rookie come in and be that guy? Be that reliable target? There's only so much you can ask Dalton Kincaid to do. I still have questions about the interior of their offensive line, which is there's a lot of moving pieces there. Safety position. So just looking at their secondary, safety to me, it's such an important part of the McDermott defense.
Yeah.
And I mean, now you had Poyer and Hyde. So this is similar to what I thought was going to happen with the Bengals when they lost, their two safeties. Anarumo was quoted saying it's going to be a dark day if we lose both of our safeties, and they did, and it was a pretty dark day. We'll get to the Bengals, so I think it did address that position. But yeah, looking at the safety and then the depth at corner, it's pretty dicey if there's any injury. So I'm a bit worried about their defense. I mean, Von Miller, what are you going to get out of him now? So yeah, I have some questions about this team. I am right on projection wise with their win total. Like I project a little over 10. So no play for me, but the Bills, it just feels like, and I know Bills fans are going to hate to hear this, but potentially that window that they had might have at least partially closed. I wish we would have gotten that future to the window last year at 50-1. But yeah, there's definitely some questions on this roster. Still one of the better teams in the AFC,
Mm-hmm.
but many more questions that I have compared to recent seasons.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind this AFC, once again, at least at this point, is looking pretty stacked. Especially if the Jets and Aaron Rodgers come back, healthy, and the the Bengals and Burrow come back healthy. So to me, this looks like a good team, but no longer a shoe-in elite team. Like they could be elite, that obviously is their ceiling, but to me, it looks more like a good team. I think going on the road, obviously you're facing Miami, the Jets on the road, but also Baltimore, Houston, Detroit,
Kansas
the
City,
Rams.
San Fran.
Yeah. Like those are at home, but those Kansas City is going into the bye, San Fran's coming out the bye, so that's not easy. Just a really tough schedule as you would expect for a top team, in that division. But yeah, I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough sledding, and I think somebody needs to step up at receiver, and at this point, we just don't really know who that's going to be or if there is going to be somebody. So I'm a little bit under this 10.5. I think they finish 9 or 10 to me is the most likely outcome at this point in the offseason for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, if I had to bet it, I'd go under. But yeah, road trips to like Seattle and the Rams aren't easy. Weeks 2 through 5,
cross
it's
country.
Like, you assume they beat Arizona to start the season, but then you're at Miami, home against Jacksonville, at Baltimore, at Houston, at the Jets. Like with some of the questions on the roster, they could get off to a really slow start here. So no play on the Bills, but I would lean under.
Miami, 9.5 wins. Them and the Jets are both tied, but Miami's a little more juice to the over at -145 at BetMGM. Now, some things to note with Miami, they, their opponents have a rest advantage on them. They have one of the worst rest advantages in the league. Do the Dolphins, and I like the Kendall Fuller sign at cornerback. I still think the interior offensive line is a concern. So this team, I think wider range of outcomes for me. What about you?
Yeah, what is the update? I should know this before doing a pod. But what is the like most reasonable expectation for when Phillips will come back? Do you happen to know that?
I don't have that off the top. That's a good question. Let me see.
Because
he got hurt late in the year, right? That was pretty late in the year.
And
right?
It's a defense that lost a lot. They lost a lot of pieces. Wilkins, Van Ginkel, Jones on the back end. Now they brought in a lot of, they brought in Fuller, Poyer, Gallimore, Brooks, kind of more quantity over quality, trying to plug some of those holes. And obviously you bring in OBJ, Jonnu Smith, Aaron Burr, at center to anchor the offensive line. I think this team is they do have a much easier schedule than the Bills. I have the Bills with the 5th hardest schedule in the league. Per my power ratings, I have Miami at 18. I project them right at like 9-6-ish wins, which is kind of right on their number. I think that this defense, like this is supposed to be the Fangio year 2 bump with the defense, right? But you're not getting that. And then you have a lot of turnover. So I still think the defense, and I'm just not fully bought in on Tua being able to take this team to the promised land. So they don't interest me from, a futures perspective or as a longer shot. Will be a fun team to watch, obviously. But I wouldn't be surprised if they finish, 8, 9, 9, and 8, right around there. Again, it's schedule's a bit easier, but it's still the AFC.
Yeah, and just to update on Jalen Phillips, him and Bradley Chubb looks like no definitive timeline. Of course, Phillips coming back from that Achilles, so I would kind of, for now at least, lean on the pessimistic side as far as you getting a full season at full strength out of him. I think the schedule to close the year is where, if Miami doesn't get off to a hot start and kind of take care of business early, I think the schedule to close the year could pose some issues. Your final 6 games at Green Bay, home against the Jets, at Houston, home against the Niners, at Cleveland, and at the Jets. So that's a tough way to end the season for the Miami Dolphins.
Yep.
The New York Jets, this is a team I think is going to garner a lot of interest. Minus 120, juiced up to the over on 9.5 wins at BetMGM. They do have a little bit of a rest advantage. Although they are one of the teams that has, there's been more of this year than there has in the past, but they have a stretch where they play 3 games in 10 days. But outside of that, they still do have a little bit of a rest advantage. The defense is still stacked. The offensive line should be improved. Wide receiver could be improved. I mean, a little better on paper, but who knows? You might be relying on a rookie and Corley in the slot. Lazard is still there. He might have to make the team just because of his contract. And then who knows, Mike Williams and his health and, going to a new quarterback. But I think the big question for the Jets ultimately comes down to, can Aaron Rodgers stay healthy and give them what they need in his age 41 season? What do you think?
Yeah, I project if I had to guess what they finish with, I would say this team will go 10-7 if 10-7-ish, although I project them at like 9-2. Mm-hmm. So my numbers slightly lean to the under, but I like the way the schedule sets up. I have them with like the 7th easiest schedule in the NFL. But you nailed it. It comes down to health of not only Rodgers, but this entire roster, which is pretty thin. And they went out and they did, credit to them, credit to Douglas and company, that they went out and they plugged the gaps in their roster, but they did so with a number of guys that have had injury concerns. This has been talked about ad nauseum when it comes to the Jets. Can these pieces stay healthy? Because the depth, it gets dicey quick. You need that offensive line, right? The biggest question, is obviously Rodgers. How much, and no one knows the answer to this, how much will he drop off from what we've seen, right? And you could say, 2 years ago, he had the thumb injury. We saw a little bit of decline. How much of that was the thumb injury? How much of that was his age? Last year, obviously, he plays, we get no data on it, but he gets another year older. But if that offensive line can't stay intact, then, all bets are off. And you got the hope that Rodgers lives up to expectations and also stays healthy. I do wish, and there's a lot of talk about this, I do wish that they went out and got another offensive coordinator. I think Nathaniel Hackett came out today and said he believes that Robert Saleh has confidence in him. That doesn't sound like the most confident-inducing statement, but not a huge Nathaniel Hackett guy. We'll see how much of the offense is actually run by Rodgers. But this is a team that, look, their defense has a ton of potential. There's some questions at safety that I have, but when you have a really good corner group and a really good defensive front, and now you have some nice weapons, you address the offensive line, it just comes down to health. And if Rodgers can be Rodgers from a couple of years ago, this team has a ton of upside. So I don't hate, and people that want to take a flyer on the Jets, you say, just based on the fact that hey, if Rodgers is Rodgers and there's health and we have this defense, I mean, think about it. The team is pretty competitive with Zach Wilson, who's probably a 3rd-string quarterback this year. So yeah, there's just too many question marks. Nathaniel Hackett kind of just keeps me off of wanting to invest in the Jets at the market price that they're at now. So this is a stay away for me.
Yeah, I would much rather invest in the Jets than just like something high upside than the over on their win total, even if you do think, everything goes the right way, because you kind of hit it. The depth is shaky. I think there's some questions about how they use the draft too. They draft Olu Fashanu out of Penn State, tackle, but he, is he even going to start with what, what they did in free agency on the offensive line? And then, you draft Corley out of Western Kentucky, a wideout, but then you also draft 2 backup running backs with your top 5 picks and a backup quarterback, so this is another situation where, I think the Jets could have used the draft a little better to kind of help them win now. That kind of remains to be seen. I still have questions about Williams and even some of these offensive line additions. I think the Fashanu pick is good, but Tyron Smith, that was a big addition, but he's no guarantee to stay healthy. Morgan Moses is what is he? He's 33. So you're relying on some older guys kind of all around. You're relying on Mike Williams to come back and be healthy and have chemistry with a 41-year-old quarterback. So there's a lot of kind of I think there's a lot of fragility. I guess I'll put it to this Jet team this year, like the high upside, but probably a lower floor than people think as well, at least offensively.
Yep.
New England, 4.5 wins, juice to the over at -160. So win total is closer to 5 if you want to kind of look at it that way. But the schedule is pretty solid for them. They have a very good edge in terms of the amount of rest days they have compared to their opponents. At +12, they have 4 games where they have more rest than their opponents and none where their opponents are coming off extra rest. Wide receiver is still a big concern. Obviously, the quarterback situation is a big concern. And then you also wonder, with Mayo here, is a defense that always kind of overachieved under Belichick and was always greater than the sum of its parts. Can it continue to do that now, in a new regime? So a lot of question marks about the Patriots. What are you thinking with New England?
Yeah, I think that the hate for New England is starting to swing a little too far and might go, as far as the win total is concerned, if it keeps coming down, I might invest in the over. Look, Brissett is one of the best. I think he's probably going to start. I don't know. I mean, if the fans there are probably going to just be, after what they've seen, they might just be clamoring for Drake May, but the early part of the schedule is brutal. Right, you're at Cincy, home against Seattle, at the Jets, at the Niners, home against the Dolphins, home against the Texans. Like, that's pretty brutal. So you might just say, hey, look, Brissett's a known commodity. And one of the reasons he's one of the best backups in the NFL, guy doesn't turn the ball over, makes smart decisions. So you might see, Brissett start the year. And then, if it goes well, then he'll probably continue to be the starter. And then if it doesn't, and they're kind of belly up, then you might get Drake May, who I actually like more than a lot of people, I think. And then he'll get to come in if it doesn't go well against the softer part of the schedule, which is on the back half. But this is a team that's, I still think the defense, the question with Belichick is a really good one. I mean, I think not having him, it was time for him to go. It was time for them to part ways, and he was losing his touch in many different areas, even special teams, which was unheard of for Belichick. But how much of his fingerprints, how much of the defense's success was because of his adjustments and his fingerprints? We'll find out this year. But, I think the defense still has a lot of talent, and with better health, they can be a solid unit. The questions are obviously all on the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line, major question marks. The wide receiver room, talk about a lack of a one, and then your quarterback. So it's hard to win in the NFL when you have questions in those 3 areas on the offensive side of the ball. But I project between 5 and 5.5 wins, and if they can just survive and get a couple of wins early in the season somehow, I think that they'll get over this win total. But definitely a team I'm going to keep my eyes on throughout the summer, especially what happens with quarterback, if they bring any other vets in. But they're starting over, right? You drafted your franchise quarterback. And if you look, the Patriots, and for what it's worth, I have the Patriots with this is the other thing gives me a little pause. I have them with the hardest schedule in the NFL this year. Just pure numbers wise. And I don't have them favored in any game. So these are things like gives me a little pause to go over, but I think that if this number keeps trickling down, I might have to, but they are the only team in the AFC with a new head coach, new offense coordinator, new defensive coordinator, and new quarterback. So those are some of the reasons I haven't bet the over yet. I would need a little bit of a better price, but I think that there might be some opportunity to back the Patriots on the spread early in the season, but long way to go before we get there.
Yeah, this is definitely a team I think should be monitored because they're even at 4.5. The win total is already juiced to the over. But like this team, things could go really bad too. Like you said, outside of the rest advantages that they have, the schedule's really tough. You got question marks at the most important position. You got question marks at pretty much everywhere on offense, and then you still have question marks on defense. I think relative to to recent years, and even question marks on the coaching staff too. Let's be honest, So it could go really bad, especially in a division where all the other three teams are, they look like above 500 teams, and some of your most winnable games, if you're the Patriots, at Arizona, that's on the road. Who do you play? Tennessee is on the road. So it could be ugly for the Patriots. So
yeah, if you want to know how hard the Patriots schedule is, I mean, not only do I not on the favorite any games, I have them, their average spread is over 6 on the season. And look, just go through, if you're bored, listen to this, go through their schedule and just look at the quarterbacks that they'll face. And that's pretty much all you need to know about how tough. There's just like no breaks. And it starts in their division. But yeah, so nothing on the Patriots as of now.
All right, let's go to the AFC North. Baltimore projected as the division leader, 11.5 wins at BetMGM, with the win total juiced to the under at -160. The over is +130. They do have a pretty good edge in terms of net rest days. The tops in the league.
Number one. They're number one.
Yeah, right +16. They have 5 games with more rest than their opponents. They do have one of those 3 games in 10-week stretches, but still, I think some question marks at the cornerback position. This is your squad. Usually are very dialed in on them, and I know you're actually leaning toward fading them. So talk about that.
Yeah, my favorite AFC win total as of now is Baltimore under. I project them at 10-3-ish. So I show value on this under, and I have a lot more questions this year than I did last. Offensive line in particular, there are many questions there. The loss of McDonald is massive, just on a weekly basis, what he did from a game planning and scheming perspective. And then just on, we'll talk about this with the Chargers and some of the things that I think Minter can do. But they also have some key pieces that they lost on defense. Clowney was so underrated what he did for that defense last year. Still have to figure out the corner rotation. I also think year 2 of Monken is not a positive. Like I talked about this last year, one of the reasons that I like the Ravens and like their win total over was the coordinator hires. And I thought Monken with Lamar, right, talked about this. One of the reasons I bet Lamar MVP is like you have that surprise factor of, okay, what's this offense going to look like with Lamar Jackson? The league hasn't really seen it. Well, you don't really have that advantage anymore. They do have the biggest net rest advantage, like you said, but it is still a tough schedule. I have them with the 6th hardest schedule in the NFL. So, yeah, I have a lot of questions about this team. They're still really good, and you got to just – by the way, there's going to be a time when Justin Tucker also isn't as elite and automatic as he always is from distance. Pains me to say that, but this organization is usually good. I did like their draft, especially for the future. But to me, this is more of a 9 or 10 win team than an 11 or 12 win team. And what's the win total sitting at right now?
It's 11.5, but heavily juiced to the under, so at -160. So more like 11.
Yeah, I think there's a -140 out there at 11.5. If you shop around, I like that. I think like 10-11 is this team's ceiling if you play this season out more times than not. And you're not going to benefit from the Bengals injuries that happened last year. You would assume there was a lot of they had pretty good injury luck last year, with all things considered, after years of not having any. But that could work against them as well. Lamar stayed healthy, won the MVP. Previous 2 seasons he didn't. The team that I'm targeting, and I mentioned this last year, I was screaming to Bengals fans, why do you want to win? Stop rooting. It's hard to do. You want to root for your team to win. But with Jake Browning was trying to steal games and yelling, you shouldn't have cut me. Like you Burrow with a 4th place schedule. That is what me as a Ravens fan was afraid of. And that's exactly how this played out. I have Ravens 6th hardest schedule, Browns 8th, Steelers 2nd, Bengals 28th. And they're in that same division, 28th. The Bengals, to me, they're right in the same ballpark as the Ravens. And I think I have, as of now, this could change, but I have the Bengals like fractions ahead of the Ravens. I've downgraded the Ravens quite a bit. But basically they're the same from a power rating perspective. I can get a better price on the Bengals to win the division. So yeah, I think that, people are worried about Burrow's health. I've dug into this a lot. I'm not. I think they're fine there. And they fixed the safety position. You got Bell back. You added Geno Stone, who I'm a big fan of. Another one of the losses on the Ravens defense. Hill and Scott were just a disaster to start the year last year. And I think, in Anarumo's defense, the safety position is so big. And we saw that when, he lost their two stalwarts on the back end, bring one back, add Geno Stone. And as a result, we saw the linebackers drop off last year. We saw cornerback play, communication. So I think shoring up the safety position is going to help that entire defense. It's so key to what Anarumo wants to do. Losing Reader does hurt. I will say that. DJ Reader in the middle on the defensive line. But I trust Burrow with this easy schedule and questions that I have with some of the other teams in the division. I like the Bengals to win the division. And if you want to back Joey B for a longer shot, Super Bowl future, like if I had Super Bowl futures right now, I wish I might get a better price on. The thing is that the Bengals, they start Patriots, Chiefs. You can get the Chiefs early. Washington at home, Carolina, then they get Baltimore at home, then the Giants. Like they could start really hot. So this might be the best price that you get on the Bengals. Super long shot would be the Browns. And the only reason I say that is you're just betting on, if you're just betting on Deshaun Watson becoming Deshaun Watson of years ago. I personally think I've seen enough from last year and don't think that upside is there any longer. But who am I to say that it's not? And you can get a much better price on the Browns. That defense is still really good. But I might consider Bengals Super Bowl, but I do like them to win the division at better odds than the Ravens.
Yeah, so the Bengals are plus 165 to win the division at BetMGM. The Ravens are plus 125. The only issue with the Bengals, like they have a much easier schedule. And I wonder if the NFL kind of factored this in because it seems like, there's a lot of wonkiness with the schedule and the rest and like a lot of inequality in that sense this year more than years past. But it seems like teams with easier schedules got kind of screwed a little more with the rest situation. So the Bengals, they have a -2 net rest edge. They have 3 short week road games. They're one of the 6 teams with a negated bye week as well. So, and they have one of the teams with the 3-game and 10-day stretch, but they should be able, if Joe Burrow is healthy, like you said, this team is, I think, right there with the Ravens. The cornerback situation, maybe some questions there, but safety, they got a lot better. They have a good coordinator. Callahan leaves, but it's, Taylor is kind of more of the offensive guy there. So he's still there. So this team is, it's pretty set up, and like you said, you're getting a lot better price. So I like the fade in the Ravens for the Bengals as well. And the Bengals 10.5 win is their win total, -125 to the over. Cleveland, who you just mentioned, 8.5.
And this might be it, Bengals fans. You might want to get it this year. You have a chance because it's you heard all the offseason stuff. It's going to be hard to keep this core together.
Yeah, and Cleveland, you mentioned them. 8.5 is their win total, -125, juice to the over at BetMGM. Let's talk a little more about this. Deshaun Watson, realistically, what is he now? Is he the guy we saw last year? Is he a guy that can't even stay healthy? Like, it's something, because some of the injuries and the way they kind of happened last year with, they're just like all this mystery, and like he was throwing, is he not throwing? All of a sudden he can't throw. It almost seems like a Kawhi Leonard situation, except without, when Kawhi plays, he's usually a beast. Whereas like when Deshaun played, he wasn't that great. So like they do have Jameis Winston, but I mean, I don't think he really adds anything. I don't think he even like what happened with Joe Flacco. I think that was kind of an outlier. I don't think you can expect a backup to come in and do that, nor can you expect Joe Flacco to go do that on the Colts again. But yeah, I mean, outside of this defense, what just like where do you realistically see Deshaun? Is it, and how many games do you see him being able to start this year?
Yeah, I mean the D should still be elite, led by that defensive line, great corner group. But defenses there's a lot of variance in defensive
Volatility,
performance.
yeah, one year to the
A
next.
lot of
Exactly.
volatility. Are they going to be able to play at that high of level? And I believe they went 6-2 in one possession games last year. They won a ton of close games. There could be some aggression on that front as well. They should have a healthier offensive line, which should help. And they got a lot of depth there. They did lose Callahan, which is worth mentioning. They added Jerry Jeudy. You also got Chubb. How healthy is Chubb going to be? And is he going to be the same back? But yeah, just digging into the numbers, like the sample size isn't great, but and just pairing that with the eye test, I just don't see it with Watson. And that is what the Browns need to unlock their potential in the AFC is they need Watson to, doesn't have to get back to the same level that he was, but you have to be a top, we're talking to win this division, to win the AFC, to win a Super Bowl. You have to be a top 8, would you say?
Yeah.
8 quarterback in the NFL.
Top 10, definitely. Yeah.
And I don't see it. Now, he could prove me wrong, but I'm not willing to put my money there. And I think that's basically what this comes down to with the Browns. I project them around 9 wins. So numbers slightly into the over. I wouldn't, if someone wants to take a flyer in the Super Bowl, that's the reason. You're just betting on the upside of Watson, which I don't hate because there's other pieces in place. I do like Stefanski, but I just personally don't see it. And it's a quarterback league. Basically what it boils down to, I'd rather invest in Burrow.
And just to put some numbers behind it, Deshaun Watson, in his years with and again, much larger sample size, he started 53 games with the Texans, only 12 with the Browns, but his completion percentage with Houston, 67.8. It drops to 59.8 with Cleveland. His touchdown rate goes from 5.9 to 4.1. His interception rate increases from 2.1 to 2.6. His passer rating was 104.5 with the Texans, 81.7 with the Browns. So you can look at it two ways.
If you look into like a lot of the advanced metrics too, like just catchable balls and some of the accuracy stuff, they're all fell off a cliff.
Yeah, and he did go 5-1 thanks to that defense with them last year, 8-4 in his 2 years with Cleveland. So there is some upside there too, like you said. So yeah, I think it's one of those situations where I don't want to touch their win total. If you are a believer in Watson, I don't think I'm there yet, but if you are a believer, it's worth mentioning that their division odds are plus 550. So if Watson is playing well, and they were able to go 5-1 in games he started last year with that defense. So if that defense continues to play well, they'll have a much better chance than the listed odds for that too. So something to keep in mind with them there as well. And then Pittsburgh, I mean, every year I feel like the question is this the year they kind of fail to crack that 500 mark? Their win total was 7.5, juiced to the over at minus 175. Russell Wilson was 22nd in QBR last year. Justin Fields was 24th. Do they even have enough at wide receiver with, Pickens is essentially your number one, but you could take him out of games at points, even though he can have some dominant games. Deontay Johnson's gone. So what are your thoughts on the Steeler team with Russell Wilson apparently locked in as a starter for week 1 at least? That's what Tomlin says. Who knows if what happens between now and then? But what are your thoughts with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields leading this Pittsburgh team?
Yeah, I mean, look, I project the Steelers. I think you can find like a under 8.5 juiced heavy. I project them closer to 7, right? Just below 7.5. But like, I tried this one time in the past 6 years, betting the Steelers under.
Yeah.
And that was it for me. Tomlin's just going to win a couple games that he he shouldn't.
Yeah.
And like why am I going to bet against that? So they'll probably it'll probably come down to what'll happen is they'll play the Bengals. The Bengals have everything locked up in the finale, and the Steelers will be 8-8, and then they'll beat the Bengals to win 9 games. So my numbers lean under. I mean, look, I think you had to do, like, signing Russ was smart. Like, you're not paying him, right? I don't think they're paying him anything.
No, Denver's paying him.
Yeah. So, why not take a shot? You bring in Fields for some insurance and some depth. It obviously wasn't working out with Pickett, so I agree with moving on. And who cares about Mason Rudolph? But I still do have questions about this roster. The offensive line, to me, still isn't set. Wide receiver depth, specifically in the slot corner. There's definitely still some holes, and at the end of the day, Russell Wilson's washed. Like, come on. And if you're gonna have one of the most underrated parts of the Broncos last year is that their offensive line is pretty good. And the Broncos have a pretty underrated offensive line, all things considered. So now you're getting Russ another year. The offensive line has question marks. You're in a tough division in the AFC. So, and you have the hardest schedule in the NFL. So that's actually, I have them with the second hardest. I have, who do I have the first? New England with the hardest. So all of those things, it's hard for me. I know Tomlin he's just going to win a couple of games that he shouldn't. But my numbers say under, my gut says under, but I'm just not betting it. I'll look for the classic Tomlin spots. Like, looking at the schedule, let's see. Home against Dallas, week 5. I have them as an underdog in that game. They'll probably win that game. Let's see. The Jets, after they beat the Bills at home, go to Pittsburgh. So I have the Steelers as a small home dog, but they probably win that game. I mean, these are just Tomlin spots. I'd rather bet the Tomlin spots. That
week
will
to
just
week
end up stealing, and they'll probably beat the Ravens. They'll probably split with the Ravens.
There'll probably be a disgusting tie in there too. So maybe he gets to 500. They'll win 8 games, go up a half over that 7.5, and go like 8-1, and the 500 will be intact, and there'll be a disgusting tie somewhere in there that will piss off their fans and fans of like 3 other fan bases, because it'll probably impact the AFC playoff race.
Yep. So yeah, numbers say under. My gut says under, but it's Tomlin, and they'll just win a couple of these spots, and yeah. So no play for me.
AFC South, Texans 9.5, minus 145. I went over on that. The Texans, I mean, they still have holes. They're still far from a perfect team or like a elite team, but I do think they have that ceiling with CJ Stroud. They have a +7 net rest edge, 4 games with more rest than their opponents. They did have some big signings, Diggs on one side of the ball, Danielle Hunter on the other. Stroud did play well, even when the offensive line was not playing well. So the questions about that are makes you feel a little better. So can the Texans get to 10 wins this year? I think so. But I think they're also going to be a pretty hyped up team. So I hate kind of betting into that, but I'm not really impressed with, as it seems like every year, I'm not really impressed with the rest of this division. But what are your thoughts on the Houston Texans entering year 2 of CJ Stroud?
Yeah, I look, the Texans are doing the right things. You have what I think is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL on a rookie deal. You go all in. You go get Diggs. They added Hunter, Fatukasi, Autry, Shair on the defensive end. You brought in Mixon at running back. The interior offensive line is still a question. So I'm very curious to see how this all shakes out. Like, does Howard end up moving to left guard? And if Fisher can play right tackle, I don't know if he'll be able to right away. But, if he is, that might be your best bet. But the interior of the offensive line, depending on all these moving parts and how it shakes out, is still a question. I think the biggest upside, maybe the key to this team, because I project them right around 9.5-ish, but love the upside. Don't hate this is you're going to bet on Stroud. Like, I'm not betting against Stroud. Like, even if I showed this is 9 in this division, I wouldn't bet the under. And if you want to bet a Texans Super Bowl future, they're one of the handful of teams that I could see winning the Super Bowl.
Yep, absolutely.
And let's see. They start Colts, Bears, Vikings, Jags, Bills at home, Patriots. Like, so they could get off to a pretty good start. And then your number, that's one of the things that I like to look at. Like, will this be a number that I can get? More likely than not, a better number during the season. Might not be the case with the Texans. I think, they did go 7-3 in one possession games. Their stock is at an all-time high, but sometimes it's just like Stroud is just that good that it doesn't matter. The corner spot opposite Stingley, I think, is the key to their team. Because I really like Petrie. Ward, when healthy, knows that D. Good veteran presence back there. I believe in Stingley. But, like, Ken Okudah, you got 2 busts. And Okudah showed some flashes last year. But you got Okudah, and who's the other one? Henderson that they brought in?
Yep, CJ Henderson, and then they got
so 2 busts, and then you got Lassiter, who probably drafted, probably gets the slot. But if, like, Okudah, I think is probably more likely than Henderson, if he can emerge as just a reliable second corner, but that's just a huge glaring hole. And then if you have a Lassiter in the slot, it's just it's not like you have all pro safeties. So the secondary would still be a major concern and probably end up holding them back from a Super Bowl. But, if Lassiter flashes and then just Okudah plays to a good number 2, like just an average number 2, solid, not getting roasted all the time, and you got Sting on the other end, this team has Super Bowl upside. Obviously, like the Texans, love Stroud, and we'll look to bet him when possible during the season.
Yeah, they're also still slightly plus money to win the division at plus 110. I do think they're clearly the best team in the division. Like the Jacksonville Jaguars are the number 1 contender. We'll get to them. But I do want to say, I think there might be some kind of unrealized upside or intangibles going on with the defense too. D'Amico Ryans, I think, a very good coach. And I think some of the game plans they had down the stretch last year on defense to kind of hide some of their weaknesses and into the playoffs even, I thought were pretty good. So I am cautiously optimistic that this defense might outplay its, on paper rating as well. So yeah, I do.
Yeah,
like
year 2 bumps across the board.
Yep.
With a new head coach, both coordinators, quarterback, all back. I think the only other teams in the AFC that can say that are the Colts, but you have a quarterback who didn't really play the whole year like Stroud did. The Chiefs, and I want to say the Jets, but I'm not sure. But Rodgers didn't play all last year, and Hackett is your offensive coordinator. The teams that could say that last year, by the way, going into last year, all went over their win totals. Ravens, Bills, Packers, Chiefs, Steelers, and 49ers.
Jaguars, 8.5, minus 120 to the over. So about even on both sides with them. This is an 8 to 9 win team to me. It seems like they don't seem to ever kind of truly get over the hump. Last year I faded them. They seemed a little bit fragile. And their depth issues did kind of bite them later in the year. So my question to you, Stug, is what do you think of the roster this year? We know Trevor Lawrence. We know, a couple of guys on defense, but, do they have enough on defense? And is this roster deep enough to truly, challenge Houston, first of all, and make a run in the AFC?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the idea of just like buying the Jags this year. We talked about last year, like it's time to fade the Jags, like where they were priced. Mm-hmm. Going into last year in that division. So, they're kind of flying a little bit more under the radar. They lost Ridley, but they brought in Gabe Davis, Mitch Morse. They drafted Brian Thomas, who I actually like. And I think the biggest question is, can the offensive line take a step forward, right? You get a healthier Cleveland, you get Harrison in his second year, Morse at center. They really need that. And then, you need Brian Thomas to hit. The defense, they added Armstead, which helps a bit, added Savage. Can they get anything from Mason Smith or Jordan Jefferson on the defensive line? I think that'll help. The secondary is still just a huge question mark to me. And I think that's what's going to hold them back. I project them. Let's see. They have like a league average schedule. I project them at around 8.5 wins, 8.7. I think their win total is 8.5. I think that one of the ways that I would look to bet Jacksonville is, in order for them to like be a contender, win this division, in the division with Stroud in it, I think that they're going to have to win 10, at least 10, but I think 11 games to win this division. And what would have to happen for that to happen? I don't think that the defense is going to be the calling card with that secondary.
No.
They're going to be in high-scoring games. They need the offensive line to improve, so some of those things that I just mentioned. They need Brian Thomas to hit, and they mainly need Trevor Lawrence to have a huge year. So I've seen numbers out there for 30, 40 to 1 for Trevor Lawrence MVP. I think if you believe in the Jags and believe in like Trevor Lawrence having, guy still has a ton of potential, very inconsistent. But if you believe in him putting it all together, and with the help of the offensive line, this receiving core, I think Trevor Lawrence MVP, because basically to win the MVP now, it's going to be a quarterback. McCaffrey didn't win it last year. How's the quarterback not going to win it? And you got to win, 11-ish games, 10, 11, 12 games. So I think that's the best way to bet the Jags is Trevor Lawrence MVP, because they're going to be in high-scoring games, shootout, and in order to win the division, in order to reach their peak, I think he has to have a huge year, and he'll be in the running if that's the case, and you're kind of buying the bottom. If he's not, and he's inconsistent, this team wins 8 or 9 games, and the win total is priced perfectly.
Another team with a win total of 8.5 is the Indianapolis Colts, although it's juiced to the under at -140. I do like the under for the Colts. Really impressed with what they did last year. I think I was on the under on them as well, so take that for what it will. I was wrong on them last year, but this year they're coming in. They have a bottom 3 net rest edge at -17 days. Only 1 game where they have more rest than their opponent. 5 games against teams with extra rest, none versus teams on short rest. They're one of the 6 teams with a negated bye week. Richardson got hurt twice in 4 starts. He ran 10 times in the other 2. So, it's just not sustainable, I don't think, for him to get through a season like this. Joe Flacco, great little run there on Cleveland, but he's 39. And this roster, I think, is pretty solid, but it just lacks like the true superstars, I think. So
secondary major question too.
Yeah, Juju Brunson, Dallas Flowers outside, some day 3 picks. Kenny Moore, probably your best corner at this point, but he's 30.
He's in the slot. Yeah, he's in the slot. Your 2 outside corners are very, very questionable.
Yes. So this, to me, this is still more of a under 500 team than not, especially with, I think Houston taking another step forward. And the Jags, probably have more upside than down, at least at this point, and where they're priced in the market. So I like the under on Indianapolis. What are you thinking?
Yeah, don't mind. I show a little value numbers wise, but stay away from me. If Richardson can hit his potential, I'm not a Richardson truther. If you are, the argument is, because I love Steichen, the offensive line is still intact. You had a Mitchell wide receiver, but I don't see it yet with Richardson. He'll have to prove it to me. And that secondary, too many question marks, but not enough value for me to fire on the under, but I don't hate the play, but pass for me.
And then you got the Titans, 6.5. The under's used to 140, 6.5 wins. I could see this going really bad for Tennessee. They have road games against the Dolphins, Bills, Lions, Chargers, Texans, Jaguars, Colts, Bears as well. Home games even are no cakewalk. Jets, Packers, Bengals, Texans, Jags at home. Still have questions at tackle, even with the high draft pick. Lots of new pieces, so they some upgrades in the offense at the skill positions, but still lots of new pieces. You put a lot of guys, you signing a lot of guys in free agency. Will Levis had the second worst QBR of 32 qualifiers, ahead of only Zach Wilson last year. Wougier is getting older. He wasn't as good as he was in the past, coming off that injury last year. Snead is good, but Casey was willing to cut bait on him. How good is he outside of like a Spagnuolo scheme? That also remains to be seen. So I'd also lean under on the Titans, even though they're at 6.5. I just think there's a lot of downside here. But what are you thinking on Tennessee?
Yeah, I project 6. A lot of questions in the front 7 too on defense outside of Simmons and Landry. Awuzie, Snead. I think they're going to sign Justin Simmons, which I think would be smart at safety.
Yeah.
So there's some pieces here on defense. They added Pollard. We saw how that went last year for Dallas. Boyd and Ridley. They did upgrade their wide receiver room, which should help.
Yeah. Those guys are getting older,
Levis, but yeah, that's true. But the offensive line still has question marks. You got to rely on Latham, and bringing in Cushenberry doesn't necessarily move the needle for me. I project them right at 6. I've been favored in 2 games, and this is a team last year. They went 6-11, and now I have them with one of the top 5 hardest schedules in the NFL. Tough break for the Titans. Lead under, but pass for me.
All right, let's speed things up a little. AFC West. I think the team I really want to talk about is the Chargers, but we'll start with the Chiefs. 11.5. We know they're 9-2 over their win total with Andy Reid. You had some issues making some news in the offseason, but any thoughts on the Chiefs here? 11.5 is the win total, 9-2 with Andy Reid.
Yeah, I mean, I had the 21st. The 21st ranked schedule in terms of difficulty after winning back-to-back Super Bowls. So they got a break there. There's some landmines on their schedule though. It's like Ravens revenge to start the year. Bengals, they're going to the road to the 49ers. We'll have that game circled. That comes after a bye. You have at the Bills with revenge like that. So there's definitely some landmines on their schedule, but I project them 11-4. I mean, look, it's the Chiefs. They're going to be there at the end. Basically, just can they stay healthy? Because Mahomes, is he going to have an injury? I love Worthy, and I love the addition of Brown. Mm-hmm. If Rashee Rice, that's another question mark. What's going to happen with Rice? But if you add that speed to that offense, you got to remember though, Kelsey, he's not getting any younger, and you remember during the regular season, he's obviously going to turn it on in the playoffs, but. There's a reason this offense looks so bad during the regular season, but I do like the addition of Worthy and Brown. If Rice, who knows his status, and their schedule starts with Baltimore, Cincinnati. Left tackle is the biggest question mark. Do lose Snead, but they just done such a good job of adding great young pieces in the secondary and at linebacker. Defensive line still meh to me, outside of Chris Jones, obviously. Can that D duplicate what they did last year? I mean, trust Spags? I don't know. I'm at 11-4. We know the Chiefs, as long as Mahomes doesn't get hurt, they're going to be there in the end. But no play for me preseason.
Yeah, this is a team. I mean, just bet them to win the conference or the Super Bowl. I mean, historically, betting
when they start 0-2, when they lose to the Ravens and Bengals, then win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, because like historically, betting. I know they're 9-2 with Reid, and that there's something to be said for that, but. Historically, betting the over on double-digit win totals is a losing bet. So, no interest there, but I do like some of the additions on offense. Now it just comes down to Rice's health and, replacing Snead, as you mentioned. But the Chargers are the team I want to spend the most time on here just because, number one, they're smack dab in the middle of the win total spectrum, 8.5, although it is juiced to the over at -150, so closer to 9 than not. They do have a -10 rest edge, which is tied for 6th worst. They only have one game with more rest than opponents, but that's combined with the fact that they don't usually have a home field advantage. But Harbaugh, he did go over his win total in 3 of the 4 years with the Niners. He should restore kind of some order here. They go, O-line early in the draft, and they get McConkey in the 2nd round at wide receiver. I think this team has some intrigue. The schedule makers, I don't think, did them a much, great favors, but overall, what are you thinking with this Charger team in year 1 of the Harbaugh era?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't favored in 10 games, second easiest schedule in the NFL. per my power ratings. They went 3-8 in one possession games last year. Had bad injury luck. Obviously, we're dealing with Brandon Staley. I think
Easton
losing
Stick.
the team and
Yeah.
Easton Stick. This is the Harbaugh, Roman, Minter era. They're going to be relying on a lot of rookies in key spots. I think they just lack weapons. Is what really. This is basically the new Ravens offense with what Greg Roman had, but you don't have a mobile quarterback. Like there's just so like that does scare me. I do love Minter as a defensive coordinator. I think their defense can take a huge step forward. He's going to use a lot of disguise, different fronts, post snap, pre snap motion, just a lot more pure zone than matching, which is what Brandon Staley did. I think there could be a big coordinator bump. You're going to see more quarters in cover 3 than Staley, much more blitzing, many more sims. I think Staley was like 10%. Minter historically has been at like 40%. And I think that he's just going to simplify things in a good way while also still disguising. And I think he's going to unlock Derwin James. Like he's just going to use him as a bandit and keep him on the field and just unleash him instead of, making him cover, just use him as a playmaker. So I think that their defense could be one of the more underrated units in the NFL just because of that coordinator bump that we see. We saw it with, obviously saw it with the Ravens last year, but we saw it with the Vikings as well. A team, when you look at their defensive roster, you're not wowed by the talent. So I do like that. I just worry about the lack of weapons. And I think that they're doing it in the right way. I think this team is on the rise. More intriguing to me, not this year, but next. Want to see how this all goes. But I just wish they had like just one more reliable wide receiver for Herbert to throw to. But I do have them with an easy schedule. I project them 8-8.
Yeah, I think they're more likely to be a 9-win team than an 8-win team. I do think, even though, like as you mentioned, I think it is a big concern, not having the weapons you've had in the past, with losing Allen and Williams, but
offensive line though now could be finally a strength,
yes,
which it hasn't been in so long.
And the run offense could get back to being a strength. It could, we got the backs are still they're essentially the Ravens backs from
their old Ravens offense.
Yeah. So, but you look at their schedule, they have a lot of winnable games. So if the rest, doesn't hurt them, they're playing teams like Vegas and Carolina and Pittsburgh and Denver and Arizona and the Saints. Like a lot of teams where, the quarterback, like Herbert should have the quarterback edge. They'll probably have a coaching edge in a lot of those too. So yeah, I'd lean over here for them as well. But I agree. I don't think their ceiling is as high this year as it will be in some years going forward. And then the final two teams, Vegas is at 6.5 wins, -145 to the over. Denver at 5.5 wins, -145 to the over. Denver, of course, has that great home field in Denver, but they have a -17 rest edge. That's bottom 3. Of those two teams, Vegas and Denver, which one do you think has a better chance of emerging here and kind of outplaying expectations? Both teams, quarterback situations, not ideal.
For what it's worth, I go through. So I have all my projections. For example, I project the Broncos 5.7 wins, but I also go through every game the whole season and consider spots and just mark who I think is going to win. If you're curious, I have Denver finishing 7-10. I have Vegas finishing 6-11. I have the Chiefs finishing 10-7, and the Chargers 9-8. So 0 chance of that happening, but that's how everything broke for me. It's hard what was the question? Who could win the division or who could go
just which out of those two teams, just which team do you think has a better shot of exceeding expectations? Denver or Vegas?
I would say Vegas. I don't think Bo Nix is ready. Gardner Minshew is a fine backup that can win games. Brutal first. I mean, the Raiders schedule, you look at the first 13 weeks, not easy. Then I also have them with dogs in their last 5. I only been favored in 2 games. But I think they're going to run more 12 personnel with Powers Johnson. I liked as a draft pick. You added Wilkins up front, which I think addressed the need. their secondary isn't great, but like Graham did a really good job with his team last year. They had an identity. They just didn't let up explosive plays, even with an underwhelming secondary. So I'll say Bo Nix just isn't it. The Broncos have holes all over the roster. It's just not a very talented roster overall. So yeah, this Raiders team could be feisty under Pierce. And then you have that insurance for O'Connell. We'll see who ends up getting the job. I think they paid Minshew $15 million. But yeah, I'll say the Raiders. But I project the Raiders for 6.5 wins. The Broncos 5.7 wins, which I think are pretty close to on market. So nothing for me there.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of concerns about the Broncos quarterback situation, and then the Raiders. I just, think their defense might have overachieved a little. I don't think this quarterback situation is very good, and I think their road schedule is really tough. So yeah, I don't love. I think I'd probably say the Broncos just because their win total is one less, and they do have Sean Payton. If I had to pick one, but nothing there for me. That's gonna do it for us for the AFC. Our NFC episode will be out, dropping shortly after this one, so be sure to check that out. Just to recap, Stuck, the two you like the most was the under on the Ravens and then the over on Cincinnati with some division mixed in, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't even play. I would just play Cincy to win the division.
Okay.
Baltimore under, and if you like the Jags, sprinkle a little Lawrence MVP.
For me, my favorites are the unders on the Colts and the Titans, the over on the Texans. I'd also lean under on Buffalo and over on the Chargers. That's going to wrap it for us. You can find Stuck on X at Stucky2. I'm at Chris Raybon. We're at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this money.